Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today our analysts will be listing the top 5 compositions for the last patch before the mid-set 11.14. Overall, we've been in a fairly stable meta for the last few patches. That's all going to change soon when the mid-set patch drops. For now, we're taking a look at the final 5 compositions for set 5 before everything gets shaken up. With that, let's go ahead and get started. But before we get back to the video, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Starting off our top 5, we have Nightbringer Dragon Slayer coming in as the number 5 composition. First off, it's worth noting that this is the final patch where Nightbringer Dragon Slayer is playable, as the Dragon Slayer trait is going away with the mid-set. So if you're a fan of playing this comp or want to try it before it's gone, we recommend playing it right now before it's too late. Alright, back to the build. At the heart of this composition is the main carry Yasuo. Yasuo's had a rough time in the most recent patches because he's been nerfed multiple times. Yet despite those nerfs, he's still a viable carry. Why is that? Because true damage that scales is always going to be relevant at certain points of the game. For Yasuo, that's the early stages of the game, meaning stage 2, 3, and most of 4. Nightbringer also adds a layer of survivability for Yasuo, and lastly, Legionnaire does add a small bit of healing. Dragon Slayer scaling also affects the rest of the composition, specifically your secondary item holder Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is the foundation of the comp, as he holds steady in the front line while Yasuo goes around bonking people with his sword. Another benefit to running the composition is how quickly you can get it online. At level 7, you can easily fit in Yasuo, Morgana, Lee Sin, Diana, Mordekaiser, Trundle, and Pantheon to have 4 Nightbringer for Dragon Slayer. This gives you a bit of a leg up on other boards playing vertical traits, at least until those boards begin to stabilize with their 4-cost carries and 5-cost units. But there are downsides to running this composition. Yasuo does need decent items to do well, with his best in slot being RFC, Rune and Hurricane, and either Jeweled Gauntlet or Hand of Justice. On top of that, you should really have him 2-starred no later than 4-1. And lastly, the composition struggles in the late game as other compositions outscale it. To combat this, you can roll for Yasuo 3, but at the end of the day, Nightbringer Dragon Slayer is more or less a build that you aim for a 4th or 3rd with, not 1st or 2nd. Let's now move on to the number 4 composition on today's list, Abomination. Abomination has been all over the place in the meta, from the top to the bottom to right in the middle. For the last few metas, it's nestled itself right next to some of the best builds, but hasn't quite reached the same consistency as those compositions have. That lack of consistency stems from a few things: how early you're able to get the trait online, when you're able to find Rise, and whether or not you have the Abomination emblem for the late game. On top of that, you want good items for the monstrosity, and ideally be able to 3-star a few of your other champions. There's a lot of what-ifs to consider, but at the end of the day, a high-roll Abomination board is as likely to top 2 in a lobby as, say, Dawnbringer or Forgotten. A benefit to playing Abomination is that you can flex in a lot of different champions and traits. The core of your board is built around Nunu, Rise, and Brand. Kalista can also play a role, though her impact on the game doesn't really extend past stage 2, other than being a trait bot and holding items for the monstrosity. But with just 4 base champions to get the ball rolling, you as a player have something set 5 has lacked: flexibility. Generally speaking, most players run some type of Spellweaver build in addition to Abomination. Zyra, for example, has become a popular choice since you can easily fit in Draconic along with Abomination. This lets you aim for Zyra 3 relatively early, using her as both a damage dealer and for utility. Vel'Koz does well enough as a carry, and lastly, there's rerolling for Brand 3 and Victor 3. In the late game, there's also pivots into champions like Heimerdinger or Teemo. Abomination as a trait helps facilitate that pivot because it's meant to be strong in the mid game. Using the time and gold gained from when the trait is strong helps ease that difficult transition into those late game champions. Overall, Abomination is a nice change of pace in the meta that still favors vertical traits. There's a lot of variations you can run, meaning it promotes flexible play. Unfortunately, it can be difficult to use consistently, so don't expect to be able to play Abomination every game and be able to also do well with it. Up next, we have Forgotten coming in at number 3. Our first vertical trait of the top 5 is Forgotten. Forgotten hasn't quite hit the same heights it used to, but under the right conditions, it's still plenty strong to top 4 with or even win games. How well you do with Forgotten does hinge on a few key moments in the game. The first is when you're able to hit the 6 Forgotten power spike. Ideally, you want to do this during stage 3 when you're level 6, meaning it's common to roll at that stage, but the issue with rolling is that if you don't hit, you're in a bad spot that's hard to recover from. Draven is another potential problem for the composition, as you need to 2-star him quickly, otherwise you run the risk of being outscaled by other boards. Assuming you had a strong Stage 3 and found Draven 2 in Stage 4, great! You're basically in a good position for the rest of the game. Just add in Ryze, Hecarim, Thresh, Viego, and either Katarina, Victor, or Warwick. Throw in a Mordekaiser or Mystic at level 7 and 8 and you're good to go. The only other missing piece is items for Draven, which are usually along the lines of Final Whisper, Bloodthirster, and Infinity Edge. Look, at the end of the day, Forgotten is a vertical trait. This means you can force it every game and likely do well because of the power gained for hitting 6 of the trait. It's not as strong as Dawnbringer and will struggle if you low roll, but as far as using it to climb ranks, it'll do just fine. Moving on, we have less of a composition for our number 2 spot and more of a general late game goal, which is Ivern, Volibear, Heimerdinger. The trio of Ivern, Volibear, and Heimerdinger is a common late game transition for practically any composition, though it's most likely done from AP boards. But it's not exactly a composition, which does make it a bit weird to have in our top 5. That said, we have to acknowledge the potency of these 3 champions in the late game, specifically Heimerdinger. Most endgame goals for players with AP items is to play a board centered around IVH. Heimerdinger does a lot of damage but needs items, specifically Shojin and a damage item that boosts his damage and rate at which he uses its ability. Ivern provides Renewer for Heimerdinger plus the potential for Invoker, both of which increases the mana gain for Heimer. Volibear combos with Ivern for Revenant and does well as a frontliner. What all this means is, as far as late game goals go, those champions will set you up for a strong enough board to top 2 with. Getting there is the hard part, and that's why we're a bit on the fence for adding it into our top 5. Almost any composition can pivot into Heimerdinger carry, though without AP items, it may not be the best idea. But for boards like mid-game Redeem, Dawnbringer, Hellions, or Abomination, it's an easy pivot. You can even keep a majority of your board in, and the only addition needed is a secondary Invoker to pair with Ivern. This means Abomination can keep Abomination, Dawnbringer can likely just drop down to 4 Dawnbringer, and Hellions can all stay, especially with a Hellion emblem to give to Heimer. Overall, playing for a late-game cap board is not something a majority of players in the lobby will have the luxury of doing. Capping at level 8 is the most common, so even dreaming of level 9 is unheard of. Still, for those that are able to reach level 9 and hit Ivern, Volibear, Heimerdinger along with other 5 costs in a solid board, their chance of winning goes up a lot. Now for the composition coming in at number 1, Dawnbringers. What a surprise! Not really. Dawnbringers are by far the most dominant composition in the current meta, even though they don't always do well. But the reason they don't do well is because so many players in the lobby are forcing them, so naturally a few of them won't hit and will end in the bottom 4. There's multiple reasons for Dawnbringer's dominance. Early game, you can form solid boards around Gragas, Kha'Zix, Soraka, and either Nidalee or Riven. Riven isn't as strong of a carry, but will do well enough. Nidalee, on the other hand, is broken, to quote a few of the TFT streamers. Not only does she dish out a lot of damage, she also dodges practically every auto attack. And she can hold on to items well for Karma, even though they aren't the best slot for Nidalee. From those early stages of the game, we hit the mid-game where Karma takes over as the carry. Karma can wipe out boards with good items, so you do need to 2-star her as quickly as you can if you want to stabilize in stage 4 and 5. After Karma comes Garen. Those 2 champions together can essentially 2v9 almost any other board. Best of all, Dawnbringer is super easy to play. Slap in the Dawnbringer units, look for AP items to give to Karma and defensive items to give to Garen. Roll at 7, find Karma. Stabilize, hit level 8, roll for Garen. Boom, you're done, and congratulations on the top 4. Yes, we're exaggerating, but also not really. Dawnbringer is quite simple to run. How well you do is dependent on the lobby, but on average, you're going to place in the top 4. By far the best composition of patch 11.14 and one of the best compositions of the last few metas. Alright, that's going to be it for our top 5 compositions for patch 11.14. But before we go, we have a few honorable mentions to talk about. First up is Redeemed. Why is Redeemed a vertical trait only an honorable mention? Because looking at its play rate between the top of the ladder in tournaments, it surprisingly is played the least of the popular vertical traits. A lot of that stems from the nerf to Lux, as she was a key piece to adding consistency to redeemed boards. Consistency is the main issue here, as Vel'Koz, while strong as a carry, is hard to play effectively if you're not constantly scouting and repositioning. That said, Redeemed is not bad. It's easily comparable to Forgotten and Dawnbringer, at least in the right situation. The issue with pretty much any honorable mention is consistency. Our next and last honorable mention is Rangers. Rangers are another build that, in the right situation, can do really well. In fact, it's one of the best non-vertical trait builds in the game. Assuming, of course, that you have a strong mid-game, can level to 8 comfortably and hit Aphelios 2, Kindred, and Darius. That's the crux of the issue for Rangers. When you're doing well in the mid-game, they become a viable pivot, but if you're struggling to put together a board even before adding Aphelios, your chances of doing well go down the drain. Again, like Redeemed, Rangers aren't bad, they just lack consistency. There are a few ways to alleviate the issue of comfortably pivoting into Rangers. The easiest is off of a Nightbringer Dragonslayer mid-game board that has AD items to give to Aphelios. That mid-game board should do well, meaning it can level up to 8 at a good time. Another way to play Rangers is pivoting off of an early Draconic Abomination build that was using Ashe as the carry. This is not a common board, but Ashe is a good item holder for Aphelios. Lastly, you can pivot out of Skirmishers or Forgotten and into Rangers. This requires a lot of transitioning on your board, but both of those compositions use AD items, making them ideal for Rangers. All in all, Rangers with Aphelios carry isn't a composition you should hard force, but it is always worth keeping in mind as a potential transition. That's going to be it for today's video, folks. Vertical traits are still at the top, but at least we've seen a fair amount of diversity outside of just Dawnbringer and Forgotten. All in all, it's a decent meta to end set 5 on before the shakeups happen with the mid-set patch. Let us know in the comment section below which compositions you're having the most success with in your ranked climb. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.